We're going to cover two major things in this podcast today. One is the overall pulse of the nationwide short-term rental market. And the second thing is the availability of a DSCR loan and how it can help you make some phenomenal moves without affecting your personal credit. DSCR stands for Debt Service Coverage Ratio, and it's a loan that you don't need your income to qualify for. There's a lot to it, but to help me with this conversation, I brought in one of the top minds in the DSCR space and a guy who does these loans for investors all over the country, Paul Garwol, with Garwal Financial, and he's a rare find. I have conversations with lenders nearly every week, but very few of them who get it, which means that they understand the loan process from the investor's perspective. They're not just slinging loans for volume and a bonus. They become someone that you can't do business without, and an advisor, someone who's watching your back to make sure that your loan is going to go through. Paul is very, very smart, and he cares deeply for his valued clients, and he can help advise and at times help give you an edge when negotiating. And he'll cover some specific examples of this and insights on which markets around the country are very, very hot for the short-term rental deals. Now, finally, listen in to what Paul calls deal killers. These are things that may come up in the property that will stop a deal dead in its tracks before it even goes to an underwriter. Now, these things are good to know before you start shopping with a real estate agent, so listen closely, and I know you'll learn. And now, Paul Garwal. Well, hey, Paul, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Hey, fantastic. How are things in Washington, D.C.?
Excellent. Weather's pretty nice. How about you?
Good. Any additional buzz with all the craziness going on with the elections and everything?
You know, what's funny about living here is that everybody asks me that all the time, but we don't see any of it. Like when you watch the news and they show you that shot from the White House or the monument, we go down there all the time to have lunch and coffee and all that kind of stuff or go for a bike ride. You don't see any of that. It's like two different worlds watching the news and living here.
That's so funny. It was the same when I lived in Los Angeles. Like you see all these iconic locations in movies that are just like breathtaking, awe-inspiring, and then when you drive through them, it's just like driving through any town. It's like not even a big deal.
Right.
That's so funny. Well, I'm so glad you're joining us today because I think we can help a lot of people today. And today I really want to talk about what you do, which is loans for investors. And I was very impressed with you when we met just a few months ago because not only did you have an expert knowledge of loans for investors, especially DSCR loans, but you also have, because you are a nationwide lender and because you deal with very high intelligence investor clients all over the country, you kind of have an insight into certain markets. So I was very fascinated to learn like which markets were popping and which ones had interesting and unique opportunities. So let's give our audience a chance to kind of get to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit how you got into lending and especially working with investors.
So I've been in the mortgage business since 2007. Mm-hmm. And then in 2017, I kind of ramped it up a lot more. I was in it for a long time on a small level. And then 2017, I dug deep into it and decided that's what I wanted to do, right? So for a couple of years, I was just doing Fannie, Freddie, FHA loans, the regular stuff. And then I bumped into a couple investors that wanted to get some deals done. And I started researching, what's the best way to get this done? This is probably pre-COVID, and then I figured I learned about DSCR loans and investment lending. So I just really doubled down on that information, got those couple files closed for that investor. And then he sent me some more people. So just from referral basis and doing more and more of those loans, I wasn't an expert on it, but I started to know it inside and out because, once you dig in and you realize how they work, there's not that much to them, and then I just became an expert in the loans and then more in the areas too, because I started doing them in pools. I would do multiple deals in certain areas of the country that I'm not even familiar with. So that's kind of how I got, started in that end of the business. And then I really liked it. That's what I like doing, those deals. And I like working with investors. That was my favorite part of being a mortgage broker. So I just really went in that direction. And, once you get into that community, it just grows and grows and grows.
I agree 100%, but my experience has been from the real estate agent side. So it was 2008 when I really started to dial into working with investors, and they are a very loyal group. And if you do a great job for them, I think there's not many people that understand what an investor needs, so they really stick to somebody that really sets out to serve them, and it sounds like you're doing that at a pretty high level. So so help me understand, and maybe any other real estate agent out there who's listening, or even mortgage lender, like what do you think it is about investors that you like? What was it that made you gravitate towards them?
Well, number one, it's just a different atmosphere in the lending, right? It's really cut and dry. You know, an investor, they're either going to buy it or they're not. They move on quick. It's not an emotional decision. It's business, right? So they look at multiple properties, they look at multiple areas, and everything is numbers, right? I like that way more than not that I don't like doing the regular loans or helping somebody get into a house. I do like that too, but the investment side just was way more interesting. I have all these deals come across my desk every day that I get to see behind the scenes on them, what the numbers look like, what these areas of the country look like, how profitable they are, or how not profitable one area is that an investor might be looking in. And because I've seen other areas that others investors are looking in. So I'll kind of give them a little bit of a nudge in a direction also from what I've seen. I have view to so many deals.
So that's like a value add when somebody works with you, because in addition to serving them on the deal they want, you might be able to introduce them to other areas profitable to their portfolio.
Oh, absolutely. Because I look at everything every day, right? So now that I have this pool of investors, I have somebody sending me something, several times throughout the day to do a value report on it, take a look at it, see what I think. And sometimes they pass on it, and then I'll maybe send it to somebody else and say, what do you guys think? So I see a lot of the areas of the country where it's highly saturated for, like, let's say short-term rentals.
Mm-hmm.
And I see areas that are way more profitable than others, where there's a conception that one area might be, everyone thinks that's the place to buy the house, but not necessarily the truth.
That's one of the things that I'm really trying to get the overall world to change their mind on, because I think everybody listens to macro news now. And so because we know that the short-term rental industry and overall real estate industry has kind of peaked just in terms of, interest rates are making it relatively harder for people to find profit. The short-term rental asset class is one that a lot of people have really rushed to in the last 24 months just to try to make money, but nobody realizes that you actually have to work, you actually have to become a host and actually run a hospitality business. But what people don't understand is that once you know these markets in more detail, we can discover emerging markets, we can find opportunities that didn't exist. So while people are throwing their hands up and saying, we can't find a good deal here, those people who are digging in and actually learning markets actually can and profit regardless of what the overall market looks like, because these individual pockets are just completely, they operate separately from, even though the overall market trend may be one way, you might have a small, if Dallas is a growing area and there's an area hour and a half outside of Dallas that's just popping, kind of like Broken Bow, Oklahoma. 5 years ago, you couldn't even rent a house in Broken Bow 5 years ago. And of course now it may be overbuilt, I'm not sure, but that's what I'm talking about. Like these opportunities that people don't know exist, and they need a real professional on their power team to help them understand where they can make money. Are you seeing that? Are you finding these markets popping up?
Yeah, I think you made a great point there when you said micro news, right? So the news is the news of what comes across your Facebook page or Instagram or LinkedIn or what you're watching on, news today. Airbnb good. So everyone's like, Airbnb good. Airbnb bad. Airbnb is bad.
Right.
Well, let me say, like, short-term rental has been going on forever before it was called Airbnb, right?
Right.
Not every area is a place where you should own an Airbnb. It doesn't work in every place in the United States. Not every house, not every condo, not every city is it say, just because you live there and you like that city, go, I want to buy a house and I'm going to turn it into a short-term rental. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. But in vacation areas where since the 70s, people go there, rent a condo because there's not a lot of hotels, and they go to those areas all the time. Those have already been proven short-term rental areas. They just weren't called Airbnb.
Right.
There is in Florida in the 90s that had condos on the ocean that, people would buy them as their second home, but they would list them with a management company, and that management company would rent them out on a daily basis, all summer long or whenever they weren't in it, right? That was Airbnb before Airbnb decided to manage it.
Right.
That's the only difference. But to the point, like, you have to be open to the pockets. Let's say you live in Texas and you want to own a house down the street because you're close to it. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make any money. You could furnish it, turn it into an Airbnb, you might not make any money. But if you talk to a realtor that understands that market, or a lender like me that I know where the other pockets are, I would say, why don't you take a look at those listings in Oklahoma, like Tucson or the Poconos or Gulf Shores. Those areas do well, and the people who buy there don't live there. So it is interesting to see that not knowing the market. I guess you just need to know what market you want to be in, and then pick that market and really do your research on if it's profitable. If it's not, move to another market.
Yeah. Absolutely. I used to have kind of a shoot from the hip formula, and it was, we're looking to invest in places where they have a relatively high guest count per year. So, I mean, usually you can call the Chamber of Commerce and find out if there's 10, 15 million people coming to a certain vacation destination area, like you said, like since the 70s. Also, we want to be sure that the average home price is relatively low compared to the metric of that average daily rate. And if we've got a relatively low home price and a relatively high average daily rate in an area where there's a lot of attractions for families, and we kind of overlay that with a lot of peak season nights in a particular area, like an extremely long rental season, like those are your kind of, in my opinion, the shoot from the hip metrics that are going to help you pinpoint a certain area. And then you can kind of narrow it down from there. What's your experience, or what do you think of that overall shoot from the hip metric strategy?
I think that you definitely should pick an area and then dig deep into it and be ready to move on just because you like the area and you want to own one there so bad. It depends on what you're looking for. You're looking to, go stay in it for a couple of weeks when you have a vacation and you love that area. And as long as it pays covers the cost and you make a couple bucks, that's a different investor. But when you're putting 7, 8, 9, 10 of them, you can't look at it like that, right? You have to have a point where you cut it off. Like, if it does not gross this much, I can't even be in it, because it is a lot of work. And to gross those high amounts, it has to be a 5-star experience. That's the ones that I find, the investors that give the 5-star experience, that really do the research into how the house is furnished. Like, they don't furnish it the way they think it should be. They hire somebody to do it. They take great pictures. If that area, everybody has bikes in a hot tub, they get bikes in a hot tub. You know what I mean? So they do the things, they research the area of what attractions are there, and then what are the people wanting, what Airbnbs, lease out the most, and what are the amenities in that Airbnb. That's the difference between the 20% of people that are really making money at it. But it's still a lot of work.
When you say 5-star experience, in addition to all the things that you just mentioned, by, having all of the amenities, the competitive amenities that everybody else has, what else do you think contributes to a 5-star experience?
I would say, outside the amenities, just what's in the house, right? Like the furniture, the comfort of the beds, the cappuccino maker. I don't know, just those type of things. The ones that do high volume have really nice stuff. It's like staying at a 5-star hotel, and it's planned out. They use somebody that understands hospitality, so they have the whole thing. They're not just going, well, I like this, so I'm going to put that in there. They hired a designer to do the furniture. They buy the right beds. They have nice towels. It's all of it, all the way down. And then you enjoy staying there when you go there, and you'll come back again. I mean, that's just how it works, right?
Yeah. So let's give people some instant nuggets. Let's just give them a spoonful of sugar right out of the gate here. So in your experience, as you're looking at the market and funding deals for investors, what are some pockets around the country that you're finding are easy for investors to profit at the moment?
I mean, number one, I say this all the time on every podcast I'm on, the Poconos.
Yeah.
That is the number one place with all the things that I've looked at and all the numbers I look at. That one, if you take a 5-6 bedroom house there, you'll easily do 175 in gross revenue, no problem. If not into the $200,000 range. Nowhere else have I seen that. That's a hot pocket because it's close to New York City, it's close to Philly, all those people vacation there. There's a lot of population. It's year round. There's lakes, there's skiing, there's nature. It's summertime, people go there. Wintertime, people go there. In the fall, so it's all the time. And I only got turned on to it from investors buying there.
Yeah, you do. You definitely have an inside scoop. You've got a pretty good sample set of data of people, especially if they're coming to you, they're ready to buy, right? So they know exactly where they're going to go. And we noticed upstate New York looking really good about a year ago when we got a network partner in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley area. I noticed that, I mean, my gosh, even smaller properties were bringing in $1,000 a night and just income. And then you, like you said, you could take a train to New York or take a train to another major city. And we just don't have that in the Midwest. We just don't have the rail system that you have kind of in the Northeast like that. And I think people take that for granted because I mean, a family could literally stay in the country and then just take one day and cruise into the city, catch a Broadway show, go have a slice and then come back. So they get that city experience, but they also get that country experience. You also mentioned that they could go skiing and things like that. Well, I mean, up there you've got the fall, you've got people going to watch the leaves change, you've got people going to go skiing, you've got people to just hike in the summertime. Or like I said, have a city experience. So I've never seen a place in the country with more peak season nights than upstate New York. It's phenomenal.
And you also get the New York City people wanting to get out and have a weekend in the nature. So there's a lot of people that live in that New York, New Jersey area that'll go to that area a lot. That's why it's always booked. Not all of them there though. I've seen some that aren't profitable though, because there's other Airbnb philosophies. I'll just buy a 2-bedroom, the cheapest one I can buy. I'll throw some furniture in it and I'll put it on Airbnb. Good luck, right?
Yeah.
Because that might work, but probably not.
It used to work.
And you'll be selling it in a year to somebody who knows what they're doing.
Exactly. Yeah, that strategy used to work, but not anymore. I mean, you have to be a good host now in order to make that work. So, where else are you finding that is worthy of taking a look at?
There's a lot of pockets in Florida still too. That Kissimmee area was like one of the #1 Airbnb areas in the country. That's where most of them were bought, but Disney's right there, like all of that. So no matter what happens to the market, it might be not as easy to buy there now, or people are trying to get out because it's a little bit saturated, but it's still a super busy area.
I've noticed that zip codes that are in established markets like Pigeon Forge and Orlando that have that draw international guests. So when I was in Pigeon Forge hanging out, there was a ton of people there coming from India and from China just to hike the Smoky Mountains. And so you've got this national park that attracts international people, and you've got obviously just the gorgeous, hikes, and you've got some attractions. It's obviously a tourist destination, and I often compare Pigeon Forge area, Gatlinburg area to Branson, because Branson gets about 10 million visitors per year. Pigeon Forge gets about 16 million per year. And that's because you have that draw from the national park. And what I've noticed is that Branson kind of trends behind Pigeon Forge by about 18 to 24 months just in trends. So when saturation occurs, we'll start to see that happen in Branson, and 24 months later, or as things begin to peak and prices begin to go, or investors begin to land on that area, we can predict that in Branson it's going to happen because they're very similar areas. Only one has an international draw and one has a national draw. And it's just fascinating to me to see how the numbers change just by having that international thing that really draws people. The extra 5-6 million people per year really makes a difference for an investor.
No, absolutely. I mean, definitely that is a huge point. Like, that just extra bookings, that's all they're looking for is how can they find a way to get some extra bookings? What area of the country can we bring more to than it's just not seasonal, where everyone's trying to jam the 6 months into all their bookings and then it's empty the rest of the year. Those areas are difficult. Outer Banks, even though I've seen profitability there, they're difficult areas. I think Florida can be difficult, but you can also still make a lot of money there too. Colorado, you can make a lot of money in that area as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed areas like Breckenridge where that average price of the property isn't low. I mean, those are high priced properties. But, as long as people are paying more to stay there, the metrics kind of work. But when saturation gets pretty high in established markets, it gets really hard to make those work.
Right. Like I've closed deals in this mountain in Virginia, and I think the purchase price was over $1 million, maybe 1.1, but it did 220 in revenue. He netted 60. That's not bad numbers. And it's a very nice house that's getting paid for on a mountain. It was 2 years old. So like, it's not only is it profitable, the piece of real estate that he's going to have is amazing. You know, he bought it with the furniture in it. I mean, it was beautiful. So those type of that strategy, you know, buying in that $1 million top of the chain type of property, you kind of, if you can get it to be profitable, and then you are owning it, you know, you're getting ownership on this, you know, a beautiful house that will have the most appreciation probably in that whole area.
So what other areas are looking good? You mentioned Arizona. How is it out there in the Southwest?
I've seen some things in that area that were pretty decent. You know, most of my investors are buying East Coast. That's been the majority of what I've seen. I've seen some good deals in the Minnesota area. I think you introduced me to a realtor there, or there were good deals there too. The numbers are really good in that area. In Minneapolis, that was interesting to me. I live in DC. The numbers aren't good in DC. This is probably not an area where you'd want to purchase an Airbnb, even though people have them.
And you would think that that would be a good one because ton of people come there, like, you know, for vacations and to see the Capitol and all that. But
you
not
figure a house, if you want to buy a 3-story, they're all 3-story houses, like in Georgetown and areas like that. It's a couple $1 million. So it's 3 bedrooms. It's not like you can put a lot of people in it. So it just doesn't really make out on the profitability side. So there are some here, but I don't think they're profitable compared to other areas. Like if you were going to take that money, you could put it somewhere else and make much more money out of it.
So it really seems to me like there's two main drivers for it to work for an investor. And I mean, the purchase price of the property has to work. And you've got to have a lot of people coming there per year, right? Otherwise, you're just stuck in this competitive battle. And then I guess that average home price really makes a difference because if you're only getting 350 on a 6-bedroom, you're just not going to make it work no matter what.
Right. So it's you know what you're buying it for, and then occupancy. That's kind of like where, you know, what is the occupancy rate? Are you going to be at 60% occupancy? That's kind of low, right? You know, but that average Airbnb, I think most of them are looking at AirDNA and go at 60%. This kind of makes money, you know, and then hopefully we can bump it up to 75%, which maybe you can. You know, I see a lot of investors now that have their own websites. You know, they name all their properties a specific experience, and then they put it on their website as well. They pull their email information from when they connect on the Wi-Fi. Anyone that connects on the Wi-Fi in the house, they pull out the emails and they market to them directly. So it's things like that that can boost your revenue by sending them stuff all year long to come back and stay at their Airbnb. So it's interesting how you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, an 8% revenue bump, which is the fee that, you know, a marketing platform might take, is a huge revenue bump for you at the end of the year, especially if you're doing over 100,000. I mean, that's a lot of money that you can improve the property or, you know, pay for a kid's college or go on vacation yourself. It really makes a difference. Are you seeing anything else, like any other secret strategies that are really helping to boost income for properties? Things such as like overly themed properties or like private amenities, private pools, or, you know, pickleball courts or anything like that that's really just driving numbers up?
I've seen, like I said before, like they'll go in and research the area and see what others that are doing great volume have. Like in certain areas, you have to have a hot tub. Like if you don't have a hot tub and a steam room and some bikes and some chairs and some things that you can move around, those things help a lot. Parking is huge, you know, so all that, believe it or not, brings in more revenue. I haven't seen pickleball courts. Probably not a bad idea. I've heard that that was going to be one of the things that starts happening.
Yeah, I've started to see it.
Mountain houses, you know, and any kind of thing, anything on a mountain or in the country or, you know, with a view, hot tub. Has to have a hot tub.
Gotcha. I love talking with national lenders like you because we get such a great insight into the overall macro trend. So how are you seeing regulation come down on some of these areas that you're working in? Are you seeing it still, you know, putting a lot of downward pressure on it, or are you starting to see people like governments and investors sort of like finding a way to work with each other moving forward?
So like I'm not on any boards and I'm not a realtor. I'm more in the financing part of it, right? But what I see is, because I have that conversation sometimes in some of these areas where the HOA is starting litigation against the Airbnbs. I've seen a big decision get overturned just recently, and where it went to court and they were going to stop Airbnbs or short-term rentals in that area. But the way that it was written in the HOA form, they would have to stop all rentals. You couldn't rent out anything in that neighborhood at that point because it's all the same. So they lost that case, and now, you know, the people in there feel like they can keep renting. keep advertising. But I do see investors back away from any area. We always check if there's any litigation with the HOA, or if there's any issue with the permit, or any of those things, because it's not worth taking the chance that it won't go to court or that you'll win, because you have too much money tied up in it. And now you bought it as an investment that is a short-term rental. So the next buyer would most likely be a short-term rental buyer. And then you just cut out who would be your buyer if you want to sell it. Because in those, there's no primary, most of those saturated areas or high vacation areas, there's not a lot of primary houses being purchased there. Even though people do live there, it's on a minor scale. It's probably 25%.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. So fascinating. So is this just a good practice that you're doing, checking to make sure that, regulation is good, or is this actually a requirement by some of the lenders now, prior to funding condition, to make sure that, things are good?
I haven't seen that prior to funding at all, because they don't read the HOA docs. But I always check, because I don't want to get close to closing and then that comes up and we don't, we should know when we're buying it. We should know when we're making the offer that that's what we're up against. So usually before, I'm involved in the offer a lot of times. A lot of times I'll meet the investor sometimes from the agent. So if it's a new investor to me, but I'll still be involved in making the offer, looking into if it's profitable for the investor, all that kind of stuff. So we always check that first, if there's any problem with any kind of short-term rental rules in that neighborhood, and the realtor should know that too. Usually they do. The good ones don't steer anybody down a road that all of a sudden that pops up at the end, because nobody likes a surprise like that.
It would be hard for me to get those kinds of calls also. I mean, it was very difficult for me as a real estate agent to get the call, 2 days after you close on the house and a grinder pump goes out or an air conditioner goes out. I mean, those things just happen because properties are properties, and you sell 1,000 properties a year and you're going to see some of the worst case scenarios. But in short-term rentals from the very beginning, we were always very, very careful to be the source of the source. And anybody that we would talk to, we would always make sure that we would give that name and number, allow the investor to call the county official or whoever, just to make sure that they could hear it from the horse's mouth. So in case something did change, and things do change from time to time, that we underwrote the deal appropriately, and we shared those sources with our clients so they could underwrite the deal. And in fact, even in running numbers, like when I was running a small independent brokerage, I actually asked most of my agents to not run numbers for their clients, but to provide a spreadsheet and to be available to help that person run numbers. But at some point you have to push the responsibility of somebody's investment back to them and just say, look, I'll help you source prices for insurance. I'll help you source prices for, taxes and I'll get you accurate numbers. And I'll even provide you a good spreadsheet, but I need you to actually put the numbers in and do it yourself, because you're actually really training investors to do it themselves and to, be a good. We've trained so many investors that way, who in the beginning they kind of rely on you, the real estate professional, but they really need to do it. So I'm applauding you for actually doing more than I would think that a lender would do by actually coming alongside them and making sure that the property works. And to me, I think that's why we get along, is because we're both just very much education-based salespeople, and we also really care about the outcome of the client, because, the long game is they become raving fans, they refer all their friends to you. It's awesome that you actually sitting alongside them and running numbers and making sure things are working.
The guys or the investors I work with, they'll do 7-8 deals a year, right? So they're always bringing me something. So it's just different than being a mortgage broker for a regular, conventional financing, because those people, they buy one house and maybe in 5 years they buy another house or they refi, they have needs. Investment's a little bit different, right? It's their business. Even though they have other jobs, that's the business that they're in with their money. So they're always buying something or refining something. So typically when it comes to me, it's kind of funny because I work with a lot of them for now a long time and we're kind of friends, but it'll be a text at 9:00 at night. Hey, what do you think about this one? That's kind of how it starts with all of them. Hey, what do you think about this one? They send me a screenshot and the listing. I'm thinking of looking at this. And then I'm like, well, let me pull up a value report. And I just shoot over a value report and tell them what I think. And then I pull the Air DNA, which they're smart enough. They've done their research before they send one to me. They're not just sending me anything, right? And then we dig into it. and see if it's something that we want to do, and then I'm like, you need a letter, and I'll send them an approval letter right then and there. I already have them in my program. I just put the address in and send them the letter. If they need me to call their agent or the seller's agent, because a lot of times they'll have a new agent because it's different areas of the country, right? So that it's not like they can use the same person because they're not licensed everywhere. So I'll call the new agent, and then I'll set up a call with the seller's agent, tell them how great my investor is, we'll close quick, all those type of things. And that's kind of how you have to be if you're a lender in this business, in this end of the business. You're more of a consultant, plus you get them the money every time. So that's incredibly, and I have had others, it's not always, it doesn't always go perfect, right? It's mortgage. So I have had investors leave me and go to somebody else, because it was a little cheaper or something else. I'm like, well, there's nothing I can do about that. I'd love to keep the file, but then sometimes they end up coming back because it's not that easy to get it all done. You have to be on top of it all the time and always pushing it along through every aspect of it.
So let's talk about that and your process and maybe what you would do differently that maybe a different lender wouldn't do. So why would somebody go to Garwal Financial and work with you? What is it that you do that kind of makes you stand out value-wise?
I think value-wise now, just from doing DSCR loans for so long, like I was doing them before anybody was doing them, before anyone knew what they are. It is funny. I see other mortgage people. I look at it'll come up on my Instagram, and they're doing a video about DSCR, and then they say what it means, and they don't even know. They can't even say exactly what those letters stand for. I'm like, how are you going to close it? You don't even know what it means. But I mean, I don't know if I'm an expert, but I became good at them from doing them over and over and over and over, and having issues and having to overcome bad news or things that I was not aware of, because you would not know that this would be an issue if you weren't doing these loans. Because in normal atmosphere, some of the things would not be a deal killer in a conventional loan, and vice versa. Some things in a DSCR loan are easy to get through, but there are weird deal killers that you wouldn't know unless you were working in that area. So I think the advantage of coming to a firm like mine is that's all I do. I work with all the lenders the majority of the lenders that lend out the most of the DSCR money every day, I work with. So they're familiar with all the areas of the country. They know all some of them have issues with one thing where another one won't. So I know if it has that, I don't even bother. I just go right to where I know I can get that one done because I've gotten 5 done. So I know what to expect in underwriting. There's really no surprises in these loans if you see the package and the lender has guidelines that cover everything, because there's not it's a little bit different than a conventional financing. Your credit card bill could all of a sudden pop up and your debt ratio goes down in a FHA loan because you charged a refrigerator. That's not going to happen in a DSCR loan because they're not looking at income documentation or debt ratio or any of that. So all the surprises are the property. So anything that could kill the deal would be something wrong with the house. That's the only thing. Appraisal, rent value, a septic tank. That I think I've said this before in another podcast. Septic tank is a huge killer for DSCR lenders. They don't like it. There's like 1 or 2 that will close with it. So like you could be going all, if you didn't ask that question, why would a lender ask if it has a septic tank? They don't really usually know. That's not something they would do.
Yeah.
But the appraisal comes in 3 weeks later, 2 weeks later, you're already halfway through the deal and it's rural with a septic tank. Well, the lender's like, we don't lend on that.
Even if it's common for the area and the area shows good numbers?
Yep. There's lenders that is a guideline for them. They're like, no. But there are lenders that do them. They're few, but they do them. So there are a lot of things that if you didn't know that, you could have to go around again. You might salvage the deal, have to get another 30 days on the contracts and take it somewhere else. But at that point, I mean, you're in this business. Everybody's aggravated at that point. The seller is saying, is this really going to close? Every day you're getting a phone call. The investor is worried about his earnest money. So a lot of money is on the line in these deals. So you have to take them somewhere where somebody knows how to get them done. I call the underwriters and the lender every day on my files. Like I wake up in the morning, I look at all my files that are in underwriting, and I'm like, what issues do we need to discuss? And I push on them to get them through. Even if I've given the information the day before, I follow up to make sure, can we look at it right now so we know we're signed off? I never let anything linger, assuming it's going to be signed off. So I just push the files, and I think through trial and error, I learned where to take them and where not to take them.
It's such a fantastic analogy here, because when I first started selling real estate, I never understood why people would sell their home on their own, like a FSBO. I do now, just because everybody deserves the right to try to sell something yourself. If you can save the bucks and you have the brain power to and the time to actually do that, then go ahead and try. But I wondered why people wouldn't just contract somebody who basically lives in a minefield that can tell you where every mine is. And rather than going and trying to walk through that minefield and not step on something, you just follow the path of somebody who lives there and knows where everything is. There's always something. Real estate is real estate. And that's one thing I love about it, is that you're always learning. Something new happens in real estate every single day, and you're going to learn something that you didn't know, no matter how many years you've been in the business. But for the most part, for 99% of the people, you can easily guide them, away from mines and to a successful, closing.
Right. I think that one of the hardest parts in mortgage is that, everyone's taking advice from their neighbor or their brother or their cousin or somebody's cousin's uncle that one time said they did this and that's how it works. So now that's how mortgage works, right? But they don't really take it from the professionals. They always, or the one thing that they feel like, sometimes I don't feel like they think there's value because of like, oh, the fees. What are all these fees? I'm like, there's a big misconception that in mortgage, there's a lot of fees. There's not. That's what it costs to do it. There's an attorney, there's taxes, there's insurance. That's what the fees are. You know what I mean? There's a processing fee. It's like, those are just things that have to be taken care of to be able to buy the house. So it's not like there's this, just people go, oh, let me just throw some fees on this sheet and you pay them. It's regulated. You can't do that. It doesn't work like that. So I think once people get more educated and buy more property, they realize that this is a cost of doing business. I don't make up the numbers for the title company. I have nothing to do with that. They get to choose whatever title company they want. I'll suggest some, but that's where a lot of the closing costs are and the taxes. So those are all things that no matter where you take that property, it's going to cost you the same, but it is interesting in this end of it, seeing people try to navigate it. I also do a lot of fix and flip lending, like where you buy it, rehab it, resell it, or hold it. I do a lot of that business. And I have investors that do like 3 or 4 or 5 of them a year. They try to turn it around every 3 to 3 months. A lot of times it rolls into 5 months. I do a lot of that business in the Atlanta area. That's a great area for it. And in those deals, I'm some kind of like an extra realtor in there, because usually they have to get the property at the right price. So that's where they make their money, is how they bought the property. It's really not through the flip. If they pay too much for it, they'll never recover. If they pay too much at the acquisition, no matter, they can't skimp on the rehab, so they'll never recover the profit margin. So a lot of these houses, some of the investors I work for are houses that are in like these, they're 40, 50 years old. Somebody's lived in it that long. And now that for whatever reason, the family owns the house and it's empty. They're big houses with old floor plans, mid-century modern, but in this zip code where everybody wants to live. So houses that, if you built a house there, cost $1 million to buy it. House that's been there for 50 years, you could probably buy for $575, but nobody would move in it because it's just so out of date, right? It would cost you $200,000 to make it look like a house anybody wants to live in. So that's what these investors buy. And usually that negotiation is the realtor will put in the offer, and it's usually a lot less than what they're asking. And it's offensive a lot of times. You're in real estate. Sometimes if it's too low, you're offended. So I'll call the agent prior. I'll call the seller's agent prior and say, hey, my investor, she just finished A, B, and C in the same neighborhood. She likes your house. She wants to buy it. I don't want to insult she does not want to insult the owner or you with a low offer, but here's her thought process behind this offer. It's going to cost her this much to rehab it, and here's what they're worth after. So there's not that much margin in it, and anyone else that's going to buy it is most likely going to be an investor. So this is kind of what you're looking at, and it works. It doesn't always work. Sometimes they counter and they don't like it, and we have to go back a few times. But when I am in there talking, I'm not a realtor, I'm the lender, and I'm talking more about how much the lenders look at what the value of this is, and that's all they'll lend on it. it gives it a little bit different mindset to the realtor when they're downloading that information to the seller.
Absolutely. Yeah. Multiple channels of communication, to the same point, you're kind of like an extra advocate trying to get the deal done there. That's phenomenal. I love that. Let's get into the nitty gritty of the DSCR loan just to provide some education for people. So let's talk to people as if they've never heard of them before. So the debt service coverage ratio loan is a loan where you actually don't even need to provide your own income. That's correct?
Right.
And you're actually just relying on the income of the property to produce a new loan for it. So what would you teach me if I was brand new to the market and didn't know anything? Let's say I'm an investor and I'm like, wow, I didn't even know this loan product existed. Tell me about it. What's it good for?
So basically, you're buying a business when you buy a rental house with a DSCR loan. You're not buying a house, right? They look at it as you're buying a business. It's like a business purpose loan, right? So in those loans, the bank is saying, all right, we'll lend you this money on this property based on the profitability, right? They're saying if we get it back, it's still going to make money. Our investment is safe, right? It's rentable. It's making this much over the monthly payment. So that business works, right? It's a profitable business. For the investor, it's a lot simpler, right? Because now you don't have your debt ratio tied up in it, all your mortgages or your car payment or your school loans or any of that. They don't even look at it. Your income tax returns we don't need. So you don't need 2 years income tax returns where if you're in business, maybe you took deductions, your income looks lower. So you and your income are set aside. You're a guarantor, so you still have to be credit worthy, right? So your credit has to be good. 660 is the minimum, so that's actually pretty liberal. After that, they really don't look at the borrower anymore. Now it's just the house. So they want to know where the money is going to come from to close, and it's got to you could pull an equity line off of your personal house. They'll accept that as funds to close. Retirement funds, stock account funds, or just checking, whatever's in your checking, the sale of a house. So you can fund the deal. They don't really source it they source it, but it can come from a lot of different areas. So that makes it way easier to fund these deals without really your personal income getting involved in it. The larger thing is, and the more important thing is you can close to the LLC, which is huge in this transaction.
Right.
For 2 reasons. It's not going to report on your credit. So now it's not on your credit when you go to you want to buy a new house or a car or something else. And it's giving you more of protection from any kind of lawsuit, because even if your house is closed in an LLC and it reports on your personal credit, if there was a lawsuit, they'll pierce the LLC by finding it on your credit report saying, hey, it's on his personal credit. This I'm going to assume personally too. So having that disconnect between your personal life and the LLC is huge. And then,
So a personal guarantee doesn't automatically make it go to your personal credit report if you close in an LLC?
some lenders it does. So that's where you have to be careful. That's why I don't take them to anywhere that they report on the credit. Personal guarantee, you're just signing for the LLC as the officer saying you personally guarantee that this company is going to pay back this loan.
Okay. That's good to know. So what about terms? What do terms look like on some of these loans, like down payments and amortization rates and things like that?
So on a purchase, it's 20% down. There are some lenders that'll do it with 15% down, but whenever you do the calculations on those deals, the loan has to cover, the rent has to cover the loan payment. So with 15% down, almost in any market, it just doesn't seem to work. Anytime you ever do the numbers with 15% down, there's always a deficiency in the income and it doesn't cover the payment. So you have to back off the LTV till it starts to cover, right? So 80% is the rule of thumb. Most lenders are 80% down. Rates are actually not that bad. Yeah, short-term rental, they're probably in the mid sevens to below. And then long-term rental, I've just closed 2 in the 6s, 6.9, 6.7. That's great for long-term rental.
That's great. And for posterity purposes, this podcast is being recorded like in the summer of 2024. So those are fantastic loans now when most residential rates are, close to 7 and 8% where we're at.
No, right. That's what I think there's another misconception that these rates are so high.
Yeah.
Right? Really not. I've quoting 7.5. The thing about the rate is it doesn't matter what rates are, everyone thinks it should be lower. Because when rates are 3.75, I get 3.5, I'm like, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they are. They always should be lower from the consumer side, right? So
Yeah.
they're always, no matter how low rates are, it's still not any easier for us in that conversation, right?
Yeah.
But you can't complain, I think, about not much higher of a rate when it's basically a loan that has no documentation, and
Yeah.
you're closing it in a business. They're not looking into your personal finances. Like if you took that same property to any bank or to down the conventional road, which I could do. I do those loans as well. So I could take all these investments conventional. All the conventional lenders want them. They all want to start. They all want to do them, but it would never get done, and it would cost more. The rate would end up costing you to get to that rate. You'd have to put more money down. They're not easier to do. It's just kind of like a mindset where they think it is.
And you couldn't close in an LLC if it was a
You
Fannie
couldn't
Freddie
close in the
loan.
LLC if it's conventional. No, they're not going to close it. They don't even like, and they're not going to do short-term rental, all that
Right.
stuff. It'll be and if you own other rentals, you know, if you haven't had that income on your tax returns for a couple of years, you can't even recognize it. So it's very difficult to get those loans done. You can do them, but you'll wish you did.
Right. One of the things I love about this DSCR loan is that it seems like it's almost like another layer of check and balance on your underwriting because the lender's not going to give you the loan if it's not a profitable property, right?
100%. That's exactly what they're looking at. They dig deep into that, nothing else. So they dig deep into the Air DNA, or if it's a long-term rental, the lease that you already have. They order a 1007, which is like an appraisal of the rent in that area. So
Hmm.
they know those numbers. They're very conscious of that, and so they're not lending. If it's not profitable, they're not going to lend the money. But if it is, it's closed. That's it. It goes to closing and it's done. That's how easy it is.
Well, that's great. I really love that. And like I said, one of the reasons we've talked about the Vrolio software and we've shown you that a little bit, and we still want to ramp that up and get that presented to the DSCR lenders probably at the end of this year at some point. But I really like the way that Vrolio normalizes the data, and it's really an underwriting tool, and it's underwritten specifically for those investor specific needs. So I really think that the more underwriting tools that we can give investors right now, especially those that are really searching, they don't know where to place their money yet. They know they like the asset class, but they don't know exactly where they want to invest yet. Tools like that can really help.
That's probably one of the best ones I've seen by far. If it could get into where lenders take that as start using that, it would be fantastic. I don't know how easy it is. There's only a few lenders that'll actually even use AirDNA. There's not many that will do that. So that's a big consideration when you're doing these loans. Like if an inexperienced loan officer would take a loan to somewhere thinking the 1007 is going to cover and it won't, and then the lender doesn't accept the AirDNA and they just assumed now the deal's dead.
What
So
happens when the lender doesn't accept the Air DNA? Is there any other strategy there?
no, I mean, that's why you should know that up front, right? You should have, if it's an Air DNA situation where there's no history and it's in an
Yeah.
area where the 1007 wouldn't cover, if you didn't take it somewhere and just use the Air DNA right off the bat, you made a mistake. So that does happen a lot. I'll get a lot of these deals after they fall out somewhere else because everyone's frustrated. It's been 30 days. It got turned down.
Yeah.
Nobody knows why. And it's because only 2 or 3 lenders will allow Air DNA into the picture, right? So
Mm.
unless you know that, you wouldn't know where to take it. But that part is huge because that's a total deal killer. The only other way is they try to get the Air DNA information on the 1007, but appraisers still don't want to do that. It's kind
Right.
of against what that report is, so they don't do it. They'll put notes in there, but it's not their favorite thing to do. So even
Hard
going
to
down
do.
is not any fun, right?
Yeah. What other deal killers have you seen that people should be aware of if they're going for loans like these?
I mean, Air DNA is number one. The short-term rental not covering or the long-term rental not covering is huge. Septic tank rural those are huge deal killers. For 90% of the lenders will not touch rural. So those things are enormous. The Those are the main deal killers. Septic tank, rural, and short long-term rental doesn't cover. Those will kill every deal, but you can navigate them because there's a lender that doesn't have a problem with all of that. You just have to know which one that doesn't care about all those things. Because one might be fine with the rural, but doesn't like the short-term rental. And one might be fine with the septic, but doesn't like the rural. So it's all kind of there. You have to know exactly where to go. And usually from trial and error is where you find out how that works.
So let's talk about rural for a second, because like, for example, Branson, Missouri, there's 10, 11 million people a year that come there for tourism. But if you look at like a USDA or, VA program or something like that, the entire zip code, the entire counties out here are considered rural just because of the number of people and the local population and that sort of thing. So how do you reconcile trying to do a loan on a place that's been a massive tourist destination since the 70s, and then it's still quote unquote rural?
I take it to a lender that will accept rural, because I bought it before. I've used other lenders where they say, hey, if you can switch it to suburban, we'll take it, right? So I'll argue my point that rural in this area is less than a quarter acre. The property, it's 3 miles from the center of the city. It's 2 miles from the fire department, the schools here, the shopping's there. I'll send that to the appraiser. In the past, I've done that, and they'll switch it to suburban, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen, because it still has to go to review. The lenders heavily review the appraisal. So they review it too. And if they don't like it, they don't believe that it's suburban and what they're looking into, they won't do it either. So if it's rural, I have a lender that does rural and septic and air deep. So that's where all those go. Like they all go there no matter what. They don't go anywhere else. So like if I'm losing one of those deals to another lender and I'm like, where are they putting it? And they tell me, I'm like, you'll be calling me back because it's not going to close. Wow. And they're like, no, they said 100% it's going to close. I'm like, because they don't know that deal killer is lingering out there. They have no idea what it is. Wow.
So let's talk about this for just a quick sec. So let's say it's not on a septic, but let's say there's a community treatment, right? So let's say 50 homes and it has their own community treatment plant, but it's not on like a city water or sewer. It's just on a community plant. Is that still fall under like septic, or is that?
I don't know. It depends on I don't know how they would look at it. What box would be checked on the appraisal, right? Would it be city water? Because it's usually its own, or it's septic, or its own sewer. Those little check boxes on the appraisals where it would show up. So
like community sewer basically is what
community sewer is not a septic tank. So I would imagine that community sewer is going into some public waste section somewhere, right?
Not all the time. They're open discharge plants. So
are they collectively paying for it somehow?
Mm-hmm, they are, yeah.
All that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
It could come up. I think for a lender that didn't allow septics, they might have an issue. That small thing. It's funny, those small things can just hold up a deal or kill it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the more information you can provide your lender up front, the better your chances of not getting into a situation halfway through the contract process. So
I send them all over. I mean, even the ones that I think are slam dunks, I send the whole scenario to the lender before I submit it. Right. Before I even go under contract, I'm like, let me see if they like it. And they'll pull it up. Those lenders are different. I can get the underwriter to look right at it, look at the whole thing, and say, yeah, we'll take this deal.
That's great.
So that's huge.
Having access to underwriters is huge, because otherwise you're in this like man in the hollow tree concept where you're trying to get an answer from a loan officer that's talking to the underwriter, right, who is unnamed and has opinions.
History, right? Right.
Yeah. So it's like, can we just be able to like talk to somebody that is talking to the actual underwriter that knows their name? So it's such an advantage to work with somebody like you that actually has relationships with underwriters.
And then the couple lenders that I use all the time, where I always have 5-10 deals in all the time, I use them every day. So I'm talking to them every single day.
Yeah.
I'm talking to 2 or 3 DSCR lenders every single day and fix and flip lenders every single day. So I know them. I'm used to them. I know what to expect. I know what they'll take and what they won't take. And I have clear communication with them all the time. They respond to me or answer my call. I answer their call. And the other thing that's huge, I think, in my business is I answer my phone. When the investors call or a realtor calls, I answer. If I'm at dinner, I answer the phone. If I'm wherever I am, if it's 9 o'clock at night and they're texting me, I text them back. Yeah. And that's just because nothing happens good to them over 6 hours if they don't get an answer. And that's
So,
the business we're in. You know what I mean? That's the business
yeah.
we should be in. That's kind of how it works.
But how do you reconcile and how do you find work-life balance and integration and all that? How do you find peace with that kind of schedule?
Well, I think that it is work-life balance because this type of business affords me to be at all my kids' things at school. I can drive them to school and pick them up with my wife and go to lunch with her. I just might have to answer my phone. But I can do all those things. Then if I'm just somewhere at a job where I have to be there all the time, my body has to actually be there and I can't go because I have to be there from 5 till, from 8 till 5.
Yeah.
Can't go to those things. So I work from home, so I can go to whatever I want, but I also have to work. I have my laptop. I will hop right in and go to work if I'm at something because everything we deal with is so time sensitive. And I think that realtors and investors, it's a lot of money on the line for everybody. So everyone wants their answers right away. They don't want 8 hours to go by and not have an answer to a situation. So that's my business practice, is to give good or bad news right away and answer my phone and discuss everything openly all the time. And it just seems to work. I get more business. Because I do that, I get more business.
So any other thing that maybe we haven't talked about that you would want to share, or do you feel like we covered everything?
I think we covered it pretty well. It was an interesting conversation for sure.
Yeah. So how does somebody get a hold of you then, Paul, if they want to work with you?
So my email is paul@garwalfinancial.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I have my LinkedIn page is pretty full. I blog on there all the time. So I always have articles that have to do with investing on there. Or you can call me 404-721-9098. I'll answer or text
Yeah. And if you're driving and you didn't catch that or you weren't able to write all that down, we'll put that in the show notes. So just go back to the show notes, refer to those, and we'll get you over to Paul.
I mean, I almost was late for this podcast because, well, I'm, right before 20 minutes before, I had a realtor sending me somebody and they wanted to talk to me right now. So I talked to them, I talked to the realtor, talked to them, and then, it was fresh in my mind. So I called the underwriter right away and I asked them what they thought. So I squeezed that all in by 10:56 before we had to hop on the call.
Wow.
The last
Wow.
20 minutes. So, I didn't want to miss those calls because that it was important to those people who were calling.
Yeah, absolutely. Why put off till after lunch what you can do immediately? So
Right.
I love that. Well, I really enjoy talking to you, Paul. I always do. And I'm going to be sending you some of my personal business just because it's very rare for me to be able to find somebody like you that knows what they're talking about and has the relationships that you have, which are so very important. And thank you for taking some time out of your day to help educate our audience. And if you're listening to this, please reach out to Paul. He truly is, after nearly 2 decades in this business, I can tell you that there's just very, very few people like Paul out there that has the value add that he can add to your business. And he definitely needs to be a person on your power team for sure. So thanks again, Paul. Really, really appreciate you today.
Awesome. It was my pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Well, a big thank you for listening to the end of our podcast. I know your time is valuable, and I hope you got a few takeaways that are going to help you get a greater return on that time. I know you will. And if you did enjoy it, I'd sure appreciate a share or a comment. Feel free to subscribe for instant access to new episodes and offers. There's also a ton of free content and ways to learn more and engage more at WorleyRealEstateNetwork.com. Until then, we'll continue to bring you recipes for success and real stories from real people who, like you, are living out your divine purpose. And hey, God loves you. No matter what happens, don't give up.